Okay, well, welcome to our afternoon sessions. We're starting about 15 minutes late, and so we will go 15 minutes overtime to about almost 3:30. We have two speakers, as our MC just indicated, and we will take them in order. Dr. Bajak Gongiretti from Thammasat University will speak on the political outlook in Thailand and the challenges ahead. And Dr. Santitan Satiyanthai will talk about Thailand's economic outlook. So I will turn the floor over right away to Dr. Bajak.
Thank you, Dr. Mike, and thank you, organizer, for having me here. It's my pleasure to be here talking about Thai politics. During lunch, some people came to talk to me and complained that your country politics is so difficult to understand. And I have to admit, and I should say that even Thai people, most of Thai people, including me, we have difficulty understand our own politics too. So, and I want to make one disclaimer. Given the political situation in Thailand and the atmosphere, I have no liberty to talk about everything, and especially some sensitive issues that I might need to avoid because I still want to go back to my own country and continue my teaching. But I will try to be as direct as possible. Okay, my title is Coup for No Transition and the Consolidation of the Army Semi-Authoritarian Regime. The main argument is after this coup, the army will be a new dominant political player, the new ruling elite for Thailand, and they will stay long. Even after the new constitution and the election, they might step down as a junta, but they will maintain their power in other forms with different kind of entities. But you can expect that for the next several years to come, the army will be the most powerful political entity in Thailand. And why I put the title Coup for No Transition? This coup aimed to smooth the transition, but at the same time, they want to stop some kind of transition that they don't want to face. In order to understand the latest coup, one needs to take the socio-political context of the coup into account. This 12th successful coup in Thai history took place alongside two critical transitions in Thai society. One, succession in the monarchy, the country's most sacred and influential political institution. Second, the emergence of an uncompromising and violent extra-parliamentary activism over the last 10 years that had led to bloody and chaotic street politics. These two major transitions, I argue, pose significant challenges and imminent threat to the army as the self-proclaimed guardian of the Thai nation. So they have two objectives to stage this coup. First of all is to smooth the succession process. And second of all, to stop the bloody street politics. I was asked to cover so many issues. Dr. Mike gave me like 10 questions. So I said to him that I could not cover all of them within 20 minutes. So I will try to address only some key issues, which is monarchy and military, the new constitution and its political configuration that they try to establish. And the third one is Thaksin, Pheu Thai, and the Red Shirt, what the future of them. The fourth is Democrat Party and the future of the anti-Thaksin force, and then the conclusion. This is the current power structure of the military regime. The junta said is 5 branches of the river. If you go to Thailand, you know Chao Phraya River. Right? So you have the National Council for Peace and Order, NCPO, You have the government, you have a constitutional drafting committee composed of 35 members, you have National Legislative Assembly, more than half of it are from military, and you have Reform Council, majority are from military too. The power is concentrated in the NCPO hands, which is headed by Prime Minister Prayut himself. And the NCPO will be the one who approves the final draft of the constitution. So basically, even you see quite a complex structure of the regime, but the power concentrated in only a handful of people, especially the coup leader and Prime Minister General Prayut. The first issue that I want to make is the relationship between the military and the monarchy. As almost observer of Thai politics know that it will be difficult to understand Thai politics without talking about monarchy. But at the same time, it is very difficult to talk about monarchy in Thailand too, because of the lèse majesté law. But what I try to say here is, you are going to see a significant shift of balance of power between these two entities. The strong alliance between the monarchy and the army has made these two institutions the most powerful force in Thai politics since 1950s. These two institutions have relied on each other. The monarchy is a source of supreme legitimacy and morality, and the army is a source of coercion that helps suppress dissident and consolidate power for the traditional elite. For me, this 2014 coup aims to smooth the succession process and maintain the power of the Royal Military Alliance. They're very cautious to distance monarchy from this coup, both symbolically and politically, unlike the previous coup, because the previous coup was viewed by many people in Thailand that the coup was endorsed by the monarchy, and that put monarchy into a difficult position. So this coup, they try to change that pattern. But because the coup aimed to smooth the succession process, and they know that the next reign, when this succession occur, the power of and charisma and popularity of the new king will not as strong as the current one. So you see the rise of the lèse majesté charge and conviction after the coup, at least 18 new arrests since the coup. The coup tried to silence any criticism towards the monarchy, and the succession process itself is like a taboo that you cannot talk about in Thailand. Even everyone knows that we are in the process of going through that. And during this transition, even they aim to smooth the succession process and maintain the power of the Royal Military Alliance. Military already used this opportunity to enhance their power, to strengthen their power, and try to strengthen their position in the Thai politics vis-a-vis other institutions and organizations, including the monarchy itself. So instead of being a servant of the monarchy, in the next several years, you will see military as a new partner that have more equal power to the monarchy. And it's not a strange thing, because relationship between monarchy and military had shifted several times in Thai history. The pattern that you see in the present is the consequence of the 1980s politics. It never been like this before 1980s. So it's going to change again, and it will change. The military will more in control with the weaker monarchy. You look at these two pictures, comparing 2006 coup and 2014 coups, you will see a clear difference, at least in terms of symbolic. What's missing in the 2014 coup is pictures of the king and the queen. What they put behind them in Thai, it said the dignity of the army. So in the 2006 coup, many people said it's the royalist coup. 2014 coup, I would argue that is a classic military coup, coup for the army, coup to strengthen the power of the army. Another issue that we need to mention is the conflict within the network monarchy. As you know that the Privy Councillors are very powerful in Thailand. The president of the Privy Council is Prem Tinasuranont. He was a former prime minister in the 80s during semi-democratic regime. There was rumors that there are serious conflicts between Prem Tinasuranont and Prayut Chan-o-cha, who is a current prime minister. But lately, Prayut made a visit to Prem House, and Prem praised him and also showed to the public clearly that Prem support the coup. So perhaps there is no serious conflict between these two powerful figures. But of course, now Prayut faction is now in control. We see the decline of the power of Prem Tinasuranont because he's very old. He's above 90 already. And in 2006 coup, he's the one who planned the coup. But this one, he was not included even in the preparation of the coup plan. So there's a tension between them because Prayut faction is going to replace Prem as the most powerful bloc within the network monarchy. But tension doesn't mean that they have serious conflict. Doesn't mean that Prem want to overthrow Prayut regime because they still have the common enemy, which is Thaksin Shinawatra. But the potential of intra-conflict within the army is something that we cannot rule out because of the politicization of the army and nepotism that occur within the army right now. The army was controlled by one faction, and this faction that headed by Prayut was in power for so long, longer than a decade. It means many other factions within the army have not been promoted, and they're not happy. This is a picture of Prem and Prayut during the holiday, New Year's holiday. Prem said Prayut moved to stage a coup in May 2014 was a great sacrifice and demonstrate loyalty to the country. And he also said that the prime minister is not a bureaucrat, so he does not retire. So many interpret that maybe Prayut is stay longer than 1 or 2 years. It remains to be seen. These three powerful figures within the army. The right one is the army commander-in-chief, General Udom Det. Even he is an army chief, but he still have to listen to his former boss, General Prayut, and also General Pravit on the left. General Pravit is the new Prem. He is replacing Prem as the most powerful figure within the network monarchy. The conflict or tensions between these three figures will be important for Thai political development. So after the coup, there are many measures that have been made by the army to increase their own power in terms of budget, personnel, and jurisdiction. The army is in the process of readjusting its power with other political forces and organizations, as I said, in order to turn their institution to be the ruling force of Thai polity. They brought back the so-called bureaucratic polity, that the bureaucracy run the country under the command of the army. And then you weaken both the political party and the social movement within civil society. This is the model that used to work during the 1950s, and now the junta revived it again. And with the declining hegemonic power of the monarchy, the army will justify its rule from now on mainly on its ability to stabilize the country, rather than seeking legitimacy from the monarchy as previous coup groups. So you will see a significant change. And they will maintain their power through the constitutional design. They will turn the NCPO into some permanent entity within the constitution. Let me talk briefly about the new constitution. The interim constitution that being used right now grants the NCPO sweeping power and also the amnesty. And the whole country is still under the martial law. And the martial law will be kept for a long time until they hold the new election. The permanent constitution supposed to be finalized in September this year. The timing for new general elections is still very vague. They never be firm on the date of the elections. They said, waiting for the right conditions. That's the term that they use. So it means that the elections can delay again and again until the right condition occur in the perception of the army. But the earliest of election that can occur maybe by mid-2016. And as I said, unlike the previous coup, there have been no promises of a quick return to civilian rule. The previous coup in 2006, the coup group made clear since the beginning that they will stay in power for only 1 year and return to civilian government. This coup is different. They never made any promise. And there also still a question of referendum. According to the interim constitution, there will be no referendum for this constitution. Why no referendum? Because the army aimed to change the whole political configuration, the election system, the party system, into a way that they know that most of Thai people, including all major political parties, will not accept it. The referendum will be too risky for them to hold. And what they try to establish is a weak government and weak parliament under control of the unelected political force, which is the army. It will be a regime that's similar to 1980s semi-democracy regime under Prem. But this time, it will be less democracy than Prem era. That's why I would not call it a semi-democratic regime. I would call it a military-guided semi-authoritarian regime. Now the draft already came out to the public. The idea is they propose the unelected prime minister. Prime minister can come from the non-MPs. And they will empower the Senate. And the whole Senate will be fully appointed instead of half appointed like the current constitution. They will change the electoral system into a MMP electoral system the German system. The objective is to weaken Thaksin's Pheu Thai party, to create a coalition party. What the junta are afraid of is a one dominant party that gain a majority of seats within the parliament. And they could not control that. So they want to change from the one dominant party into a coalition government with weak political party. With this system in place, the military coup will be unnecessary in the future because it will pave the way for generals, military generals like Prayut or Prawit to be prime minister without running for election. They don't need to bother even to create a military party because with the unelected prime minister and with a fully appointed Senate and a weak lower house, they can be a kingmaker and controller of the executive and legislative power. I don't have time for this issue of regionalism, but just want to show you briefly. Now Thailand have strong political regionalism. It emerged since 1997 that different regions support different political parties. So you can see from the picture, the North and the Northeast are stronghold of the Red Shirt movement and Thaksin Pheu Thai party. The South and the Central region are stronghold of Democrat Party and the Yellow Shirt movement. So the result of the 2007 election and 2011 elections clearly show this pattern of regionalism in voting. Also in the 2007 referendum for constitution, the North and the Northeast vote no. The red color showed the vote no. And the Central and the Southern region showed the vote yes for the constitution. So it mapped perfectly with the voting pattern of the Thai people. The red shirt vote no for the constitution in 2007. I will skip this. I will go quickly on Thaksin and the red shirt. Many people, including me, believe that there's a compromise or a deal between Thaksin and NCPO. That's why you see that Thaksin gone quiet, even asked the red shirt and Pheu Thai party member not to criticize the army. Let the junta run the country. That the message from Thaksin. Progressive academic and activists are not happy with that. And they ask for more democratic Pheu Thai that less dependent on Thaksin and Shinawatra family. Some even ask for alternative party. But the problem is the red shirt organization still commit to Thaksin as they have no other choice beyond Thaksin and Pheu Thai. Thailand now have two major political parties competing with each other. Even red shirt are upset with Thaksin and Pheu Thai, the way that Thaksin didn't oppose the coup at all, but they could not vote for the Democrat. So this the deadlock that we have right now. And the red shirts is quiet for another reason because the junta is very repressive. They suppress the red shirt harshly, especially the red shirt movement outside Bangkok. It's become clear that now Thaksin is an obstacle for Thai democratic development. He's never believed in democratic system. He always willing to make a deal with the elite, his opponent, in order to save his family and his fortune by sacrificing his own supporters. And the tendency is Pheu Thai will still be the largest party for the next election because Democrat is still weak and there are no other alternative parties to compete with it. But their vote base will be diminishing. Red shirt also will be weakened. The Democrat Party and the anti-Thaksin fought clearly not a winner of this latest round of crisis. Abhisit, as a party leader, actually is a liability But according to the source from the Democrat Party that I talked to, he will lead the party for the next election, and he still wants to be a prime minister again. Suthep Thaek Suban and PDRC faction are still powerful and dominate the party. Suthep is a leader of the Whistle protest that toppled Yingluck government. But domination of Suthep and PDRC faction polarized and actually damaged the chance of the party to win general elections because it made Democrat Party to be only the anti-Thaksin party, not a party for the whole Thai population. It still lack of grand vision and alternative policy platform. Under the new electoral system, it will gain more seats, but still not enough to defeat Pheu Thai. The tendency is it will become a regional party, a party for the South and for the urban middle class in Bangkok and Central region. The anti-Thaksin movement, they are not entirely pleased with the coup group, and their political role is going to be diminished. You need to understand that this coup, they aim to weaken the civil society. So they didn't target only the red shirt, they target the yellow shirt too. All political groups or political movements have no freedom to participate or to make any voice at all. All political movements were silenced equally by the coup. That's why the anti-Thaksin movement also believed that the coup group and Thaksin made a deal. This just shows the gap between the Democrat Party and Thaksin Party in the last 4 elections. So the gap was almost 100 seats between the first and the second largest political party. So the new electoral system will not be able to help Democrats to win the election with this high gap of political support. Okay, let me end with quite a pessimistic view. The prediction, I think we will see the persistence of non-democratic Thailand. 2014 coup is coup for of the army by the army and for maintaining the military royal dominance. The army has used brute force to suppress dynamics of socio-economic change and political development that occurred in Thailand in the past decade. The rural society has changed. Thai people are more politically active, civil society more vibrant, but military want to stop all of this change. The junta does not address the root cause of political conflict. They just suppress them right now, but they are not successful in changing the conflict that we have, especially the ideological conflict between the red and the yellow shirt. Thai society is still as polarized as ever. They just have no freedom to voice their concern. We will see the persistence of semi-authoritarian regime, a weak coalition government under the control of the military. The political parties will be weakened with the new constitution. Civil society also will be debilitated and polarized. Army as the dominant power and new ruling elite. And the fact that they can become the most powerful country and rule the country because other institutions are weaker and less united in comparison. Even they fail in economy and other macro reforms. But now Thai society lack of alternative. They have no alternative to replace the army regime right now. All sectors, all institutions in Thailand are weak and polarized. So army rule the country by this situation. We will see the political stagnation or even regression. No steadfast transition towards a full democracy. And to conclude, for me, the 2014 coup plunged Thailand into a state of uncertainty and instability for years to come. Thank you.
Such a pessimist.
All right, thank you very much. Hearing Dr. Prajak's presentation definitely made me feel glad that I don't have to be the one talking such a very difficult topic. I definitely have the easier ones to do with the economy side. But before I start, let me tell you interesting facts, or what I think is interesting. If we were to rewind the clock back to this time last year, January 2014, and ask what was the economist poll, the consensus estimates of Thailand growth forecast in 2015, the number was 4.6. If we were to repeat the exercise, going back one more year, Jan 2013, asking economists the poll, what's the consensus estimate for 14, the number was 4.7. Repeat that again, is 4.6. You repeat that again, is 5. Now, of course, we know the actual number of growth last year was probably below 1%. The year before that is below 3%. But my point today is not saying that economists can't make good forecasts. After all, that's my profession. And after all, my economics professor is sitting on the first row. So, of course, I don't want to give him that message. But my point is that there is an implicit assumption in all the forecasts that economists made about Thailand, the market economists, the Bank of Thailand economists alike. It's assumption that Thailand trend growth, long-term growth, is around 4.5% to 5%. So every time, if there's no shocks, they can't think of anything, then it always will go back to 4.5%, or even sometimes 4 to 5% range at least. The whole point of this presentation is for me to question that assumption, whether that's still correct, whether Thailand has already entered a new normal where the potential trend rate of growth is already lower. And my conclusion, just to give you a bottom line first, is yes. We think that trend growth is already probably below 4% over the next 5 to 10 years. And the reason for that is loss of competitiveness. And that loss of competitiveness is most clearly manifested in the manufacturing sector. So this is the issue that has been on my mind for some time. I just published a report over just the turn of year to examine this issue closely. But the fall in manufacturing in Thailand has been quite drastic. The industrial production index in Thailand has been falling for 20 months in a row, and counting, by the way. Not only that it's been falling, it's also surprised the market on the downside 80% of the time. What does that mean? It means that each month, us economists among different banks are asked to forecast what the industrial production would be. And then actual number can surprise on the upside, being the higher than our estimates or lower than estimates. Typically, the error should average out to be around 0. But in the past 25 months, 80% of the time, the economists overestimated the industrial production, so it disappointed the expectation. That can mean a couple of things. First, it just suggests that market economists is just totally incompetent. But of course, I urge you not to, again, come with that conclusion. The alternative is that there is a big trend out there that we miss. Maybe there's something we didn't quite see. And indeed, if you look at the chart on the right-hand side, there's some evidence of that. That's industrial production index, Thailand versus ASEAN versus Asia as a whole. Something happened in late 2011, 2012. So the collapse in 2011 was a flood, by the way. But since then, something happened. The industrial production level has shifted permanently downwards. And then you saw a downward declining trend, not shared by ASEAN, not shared by anywhere else in Asia. So it's not an Asia thing, it's not a global thing, it is a Thailand thing. But natural question arises, if it's that serious, if it looks really worrisome, how come governments are not really talking about that much? How come investors somehow miss this? Well, the reason for that is that we all think that we have good answers to this, why this is happening. And one of my argument I'm going to make today is that those widely accepted explanations are incomplete. The first sort of popular explanation is that this is all about auto industry problem. 2012, the government had the first car scheme, which drove up car production to an unsustainable level. Then there's too much excess inventory. Of course, too much excess inventory, then afterwards the production collapsed. But that's all fine, except that if that were true, then you will see problem lies only in the auto sector. But that's not the case. If you compare industrial production across sectors last year compared to the 2011 before the downtrend started, it clearly wasn't the auto. It was electronics, and it was labor-intensive sectors like furniture and textile. In fact, I would say there are three distinctive patterns. Auto is one of them, but the other one being the labor-intensive sectors where you saw a preceding declining trend anyway to begin with. And then that trend sort of accelerated, so the downward trend became more stark after 2012. The other one is for electronics, another case study. There seems to be a permanent downward shift in level production that happened after the floods. But definitely one thing we can see, it's not just auto. So that goes that theory. The second one is the problem is to do with exports. Weak global demand is one issue. The other one is Thailand being in the wrong sector, producing hard disk drive when people moving to solid state memory for tablets, for our iPads. And there's definitely some truth in that. But you can't just blame it all on hard disk drive. It is, again, a Thailand problem, specific Thailand problem, because when you look at the share of production of hard disk drive, Thailand has been losing market share. So regardless of the total volume of demand for hard disk drive, within Thailand itself, Thailand used to supply 45% before the flood globally. Now it's down to 30-odd%. Some of the production has shifted to like Philippines, China, to some extent Malaysia. So there is some signs of the loss of competitiveness that's happening in Thailand. So what's the candidate? What can explain this? One of the potential reasons is the surge in wage that happened in 2012. The surge in wage was partly driven by an obvious factor, which was a 40% increase in minimum wage. But it's also driven by another factor, we think, which is less obvious, which was the introduction of the rice pledging scheme. This scheme basically the government promised the rice farmers they would pay for the rice produced at 40% premium. Rice growing business become very lucrative business. Even some economists considering switching to rice farming at a time. With that, it becomes harder to get people out of 7-Eleven, out of farm into 7-Eleven, out of farm into factories. It becomes the de facto minimum wage. So all of that caused a spike in manufacturing wages. Now, to make sure, or to take another step into exploring this, we did some modeling work on the economic model, trying to understand how much of the industrial production variations over time can be explained by the demand factors, like domestic spending, consumption, investment, external factor like exports, versus other non-demand, more supply-side factors like costs. And the conclusion we got was that about 80% is driven by demand. So the slump in industrial production reflects the demand problem. But there is another 20% that is not fully explained by that. And part of it is it's captured by the rise in wage. And that's important because demand can recover. Car sales one day will pick up. The global demand one day will improve. But even if the demand were to improve, that 20% that's been lost could be permanent because Thailand has lost competitiveness as a production location for some of the industry. But before jumping from that to saying that Thailand is likely to see a lower trend growth, we have to do a few more checks. Of course, manufacturing is just one sector. many countries see transformation from manufacturing to services. Perhaps it is the service that's picking up the baton of growth and becoming the alternative growth engine. Unfortunately, when you look at the data, that doesn't seem to be the case. Service sector in Thailand growth is actually subpar and way below the ASEAN level, as you can see on the chart there. And it's not just one or two service sector that's driving this. It's actually very broad-based. Actually, in fact, only two sectors which Thailand outperformed and grow quite well was tourism, thanks to the boom in Chinese tourists, and financial service. As much as I would like to claim that's due to Credit Suisse and my productivity, my team is actually based in Singapore, so I didn't contribute to that. It's more to do with the growth in leverage, which has now sort of created a bit of a household debt problem, around 80% of GDP now, which has been increasing in the past 3 years. So service not doing well, manufacturing not doing well. Perhaps there's some common root causes. So we take a step back and take a look at a more sort of fundamental factor of production: labor growth, capital accumulation, technological potential for innovation, technological advance. First, the demographics. This is one of the issues that Thailand is facing. Thailand has an aging population problem. This is taken from one study, recent study by IMF, that estimate that in the next 20 years, the contribution from workforce growth will become zero. From it used to be about 0.8% in the past 20 years. From 2017 onwards, workforce in Thailand is set to shrink. So that is in itself quite a problem, and will add to the already labor shortages that we have. If you're not growing your workforce, then you have to grow by adding machines, capital accumulation. But the investment rate in GDP in Thailand has been quite weak and has gotten weaker. Actually, it's now the lowest in ASEAN 5, as you can see on the right-hand side. So if you're not adding to the machines, you have to become more productive. You have to get your total factor productivity up, and there are roughly two ways to do that. Although, admittedly, we don't, this is an issue where economists don't fully 100% understand. At least two ways. One is to reallocate labor from unproductive sectors to more productive sectors. But unfortunately, in the past 3 years, Thailand has seen the opposite. Growth, instead of moving from instead of moving from the farming sector to the factories to the service sector, it moved from the service sector back into agriculture. And the share of agriculture in employment is already quite high. It was 37%, now it's 38%. Then you may think about improving, getting some innovation going, increasing efficiency. The problem is skills shortages. The R&D spending is still very low, 0.3% of GDP. And you can see the rankings that I taken from this Global Talent Competitiveness Index, telling you about the skill availability, whether it's medium skill or high skill in Thailand. Thailand ranked around 80-ish out of 103 countries. So big problem for that leapfrog into the higher value, move up the value chain. So that sort of reinforced the message we see from the manufacturing decline and service, lackluster service growth that we saw earlier. It led us to conclude that perhaps really that this constraint on growth has become more binding. And the policy catalyst like minimum wage, like the distortion from subsidies, has accelerated that process, that now we have already entered that zone, the new normal, where the speed limit on growth is lower, perhaps lower than 4%. But instead of ending this in a very, again, pessimistic note, I would like to say that these are not necessarily inevitable. Of course, there are things that the government can do. I have to say, and have to admit, I don't really have all the answers. But hopefully, through time and through discussion, we can shed light on more of the potential solutions. What I have listed here is some of the key things that have been identified by a lot of economists, prominent economists in Thailand, and they are not rocket science. The infrastructure that Thailand needs to invest in, the weakness in infrastructure for many years, investment infrastructure that has been poor for many years is part of the reasons why the investment ratio is so weak. It is, if they do it right, they get it right, they can also help enhance the regional connectivity, connecting Thailand to Indochina area, and strengthen Thailand's value proposition as a gateway to Indochina area, which is fast growing. They have to remove some of the policy distortion. They have already removed the rice scheme, but there are a couple more things that they can do to do with state banks, to do with energy subsidies, which we can talk more about later. And then, of course, the skills shortages, a difficult one. There's a lot of skills mismatch as well. A lot of educated ones, a lot of people graduate from universities actually don't find job or end up doing clerical job, even though they graduate IT, science, and computer science. But if I have to leave you with one thing on this policy recommendation, which is frankly not my expertise, I would say this. It's not so much for me the policy content that needs to change. That obviously needs to be done. But I think we also think about policy process. When a country enters sort of middle income trap, it's quite difficult to find innovative policies that can change and get it out of the spot. And sometimes you have to change a policy process. It's no longer okay to just have bureaucrats come up with everything and think they know everything. It's probably to introduce more innovation to policies. I think you need to involve private sector in a major way to come up with what are the infrastructure projects we need, what other programs should be done, to help get them to help identify the KPIs, the targets, and also have the continuous evaluation and assessment. So we need to move from a more sort of top-down to a more bottom-up. And I think we have seen this recently. It's not easy, but I think in Malaysia, the economic transformation program serves somewhat as a useful model, at least the key concepts there to be applied in Thailand. And if there's one thing that I would like to see change is this policy process, and I think the content will follow. Thank you very much.
We're going to have a few questions on an interactive basis to launch, and then we'll turn in a few minutes to questions from the pigeonhole and from the floor. I want to start by directing a question to follow up on Dr. Santithan's last slide and ask him to elaborate a little bit on his comments about the energy sector and what an energy policy in Thailand that promoted energy efficiency would look like, and also to ask him to elaborate in the same manner on what a state banking sector that complemented private sector banks rather than competing with them would look like.
Thank you very much, Dr. Montesano. So the first one, I think, the energy policy, this is, of course, an interesting topic because it's one area where the government is already making some progress in making reforms. And I think that there's several elements to it, but elements that I've been monitoring, or one key element is definitely getting the relative price right. So one of the key issues in the past 5 years was that products like diesel essentially got subsidized quite heavily. Subsidies maybe not the right word. It's more that the government exempt taxes on diesel to keep the price of diesel fixed. So of course the incentive for adjustment to find a new ways, use new form of fuels is very limited because this has been cheapened by the presence of subsidies. And that has somewhat changed, again, thanks to the lower global oil price. That makes it much easier for Thailand to start to introduce some reforms without jacking up the price of the retail at a pump price. So we have seen some of that liberalization that's happening, so hopefully that will stay. The issue on the state versus commercial banks, that's potentially a long one, but I think there's a couple things. One is some of the banks that, if you look at examples, some of these state-owned financial institutions or specialized financial institutions like Bank Agriculture, the GSB, the SME banks, they're supposed to help improve financial inclusion where the commercial banks don't go. In reality, when you look at the evidence, like the SME banks, the average loan size they give to SMEs is actually bigger than the commercial banks. So they're not really going to serve all the smaller firms, innovative firms that need funding. They're actually serving the same guys that commercial banks are serving, or maybe the medium-sized firms that probably shouldn't be getting credits. So that's one of the examples where I think the system needs to be redesigned, and as a result, no wonder why it has such a high NPLs in SMEs. So reorganizing the banking system to really think like where it should be the markets where the commercial banks serve, where it should be the market where non-bank financial institutions serve, and where are the gaps left for the state intervention if even needed. I think that's the key thing. So make sure the financial inclusion happens all the ladder.
Thank you very much. To turn to Ajahn Pradak, I want to raise a fairly sensitive question on the political scenario. It's been suggested by many that one of the fights over the succession is really a fight over ultimate control of the Crown Property Bureau. There are estimates that the Crown Property Bureau is worth something like $30 billion. And obviously the interests, financial interests in that sort of sum of money and those assets are fairly substantial. Is there any indication that some of the sparring behind the scenes that's taking place in Thailand now really has to do with ultimate control of the Crown Property Bureau and its assets? Is this a component that we need to think about when we think about succession?
Okay. I mean, I have to save myself from, being charged. I want to stay away from jail as far as possible. So let me put this way. When we talk about the monarchy in Thailand, you need to understand it as a network of power rather than a family or a person. And by understand it as a network of power, it contains both political and economic interests. This network of power is a huge and powerful political and economic network. And the Crown Property Bureau is, of course, is a very important component within this network. So to control the network monarchy doesn't mean only, the political role in intervening politics, but it also means controlling a large amount of fortune. And as you may have known, if you followed the debate, the legal status of the Crown Property Bureau itself is very problematic and difficult to understand in Thailand. Every time the Forbes magazine made a report that the Thai monarchy is the richest monarchy in the world, the royal household and the Crown Property Bureau will say, no, it's wrongly misunderstood because the Crown Property Bureau is not a private, it's not owned by the monarchy. Right? But in Thailand, when people start to question about this legal status of the Crown Property Bureau, which is it is private or public entity, it's still unclear. It never been made clear. But people have no access to information. You cannot ask them to disclose the information about their business. Even they do a lot of investment both in Thailand and abroad. And they don't have to pay tax. So what the legal status of this is privately owned by the monarchy or is a public entity. So it does make things more complicated. But to answer your question, for sure, to control the network monarchy also means control the Crown Property Bureau, which has a high stake.
Thank you. Thanks to Pigeonhole, we have a question on the economy that allows us to turn to some regional considerations. What are the mid and long-term implications of the structural weaknesses in the Thai economy for ASEAN Economic Community? We have a regional interest here, sir, so that's up to you.
It's definitely a very interesting question. I think if you go back to the story I have in there, of course it means both risks and opportunities. For certain aspects, Thai growth is going to be lower, consumption growth trend could be weaker. So if these countries, neighboring countries seeing Thailand as the final consumer demand market, that's not a good news. But at the same time, because some of the things that are happening in Thailand, the hollowing out of manufacturing means there's going to be more investment abroad. It means what I'm saying is about this growth is that Thailand becoming less attractive location to produce. But it also means that relatively other countries around become a more attractive location to produce certain goods. So for example, earlier when we talk about furniture, I talk about textile, it means that a lot of the companies that are labor intensive would want to move to Cambodia, want to move to Vietnam. Some may want to diversify, electronics want to diversify to Philippines as we have seen. Autos want to do a little bit more in Indonesia. So that's opportunity for the regional economies. If anything, it will force not only the regional companies, but Thai companies as well to invest a bit more outside. And so that's the opportunity because the ASEAN Economic Community is supposed to facilitate that to the extent that if countries follow the blueprint, it should become easier to invest across borders within ASEAN. And so this will ultimately cater and help the Thai firms or even the regional multinational to leverage on this trend.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the floor to start that part of our session? Well, while you think for your questions, I'm going to turn to Pigeonhole again then for a question on the political situation. And this will be, first of all, for Ajahn Prajak. The question is, despite the great socioeconomic change that's come to provincial Thailand in the past 30 years, resistance to the renewal of military dictatorship has been minimal and ineffective in the countryside. Why is this?
That's a very good question. I think the main problem lies in a way that the red shirt organization organizes itself. It tied their movement to close with the Pheu Thai party, especially the mainstream red shirt organization. So they mobilize their supporters to protect the Pheu Thai and Thaksin mainly. And their leaders have common interests shared with Pheu Thai and Thaksin. So red shirt in fundamental way is not, never function as an independent political movement. And sometimes the objectives or the main goals of protecting the Thaksin and fighting for democracy. This goal now is in conflict right now, right? But the red shirt seems to, still committed to working and establishing their relationship with the Pheu Thai and Thaksin, and sometimes sacrifice the more important goal of fighting for the real democracy. So, but as I said, also we need to take into account that the current regime, they're very repressive compared to previous military government. So the way that they suppress the red shirts since the first day of the coup are so systematic. They arrested a large number of red shirt activists and dissidents in the provincial areas that make it so difficult for the Russia to mobilize to oppose the coup.
Thank you. Questions from the floor? There's a question over here. Please identify yourself as you ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Jake from the Wall Street Journal. I had a politics-related question. Do you think that General Prayut has the support of the palace in this de-democratization that you're talking about? And does he need it, bearing in mind the split support for different members of the royal family for succession?
I think at the beginning of the coup, it's not clear if he received the royal endorsement or not, but in the recent unfold of the situation, it's quite clear that he received support, and especially speech from General Prem, which you have to remember he is a president of the Privy Council, the formal advisory board, right, of the king. So he represent his speech represent the palace to significant extent. So, and there are many other evidence showing that General Prayut received support from the palace.
Do you think that's something he needs to maintain?
He still needs to maintain because it will be too risky to act alone or independent from the monarchy, because they are two alliances. And even said that the military try to readjust their power to be more equal partner, but doesn't mean that they can, forsake this political alliance.
Thank you. Other questions from the floor? And we'll turn to an economic question from Pigeonhole. And this question is concerned whether the NCPO is committed to economic reform or really just engaging in putting old wine into new bottles.
Well, I think there's actually probably yes to both. There is a real commitment to economic reform, and there's also a little bit of recycling the old stuff again and again, but that's not just them doing it. All the Thai governments are doing that. But let me first on the economic reform thing, because that's potentially important. We didn't get to discuss the specific view for 2015 economic performance. And that's one of the issues which I think there's, again, a dichotomy between the popular belief among business investors and the reality. Business and investors think that there's going to be a V-shaped recovery. The government's going to come in and they're going to stimulate the economy, cause economic revival. From the government perspective, the technocrats, and Dr. Prajak talked about this as well, how the technocrats, bureaucrats become more powerful running economic policy. Their agenda is long-term economic reform. Their thinking is, if they don't do the difficult reforms now, like increasing excise duties on diesel, like potentially increasing VAT, they're not going to have a chance to do it again when the democratically elected government comes in. So now is golden opportunity to do the difficult reform. And on top of that, anything which may sound like a populist policy is a big taboo right now in Thailand. A lot of the growth stimulus will look like populist policy. So it's very clear that there's a clear intention to reform, to change the policy nature from the previous governments, which is definitely more short-term in nature, but also a little bit more pro-growth. And this one is going to be much more long-term, so growth will likely disappoint. So that's element of truth in it. The second part where they recycle the old program is the infrastructure part. So a lot of these infrastructure programs have been there for a long time. There are a few tweaks in terms of whether it's going to be high-speed train, medium-speed train, or just normal speed train. But most of the elements have been there since the previous government.
Thank you. We have time for 2 or 3 more questions, and that might mean 1 or 2 from the floor, or still utter silence out there. Okay, then we will turn to Pigeonhole for another regional question, but this one involving politics. This concerns how will Thailand under military dictatorship affect ASEAN unity, cooperation, and integration? That is, will this semi-authoritarian Thailand that you forecast be more and more of an awkward part of the ASEAN puzzle as other parts of ASEAN move in different directions?
I don't think it will affect the ASEAN integration because, I mean, ASEAN never aim to, to become the politically integrated community anyway, right? They still stick with the policy of non-engagement with each other. So, and actually, the military government received a warm welcome from several neighboring countries. The first country that the Prime Minister visited is Myanmar. Right, only Myanmar that understands us right now. And they have a picture of, two generals hugging each other, a very lovely picture. And then he got a support from Cambodia and Vietnam. So in general, I don't think that the political regime, the military dictatorship that we have right now will affect or change anything because to put it bluntly, the ASEAN community never care much about the political regime of each member country.
Is there a final question? There is. Malcolm, a question from the floor. Good.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks to both presenters for very clear, cogent, if both somewhat depressing outlooks. I have a political question. How has this, however long you want to call it, national polarization and focus 2006 onward, how has it affected the dealing with the southern insurgency in Patani? Thanks.
Southern insurgency is another separate problem, but the structural problem that we have right now is we have a political regionalism, right, between the north, northeast, and the central and the upper south. This mainly is about national politics. They support different political parties. And it will remain like this for several years. And the coup the military government will not be able to change this dynamics of regionalism, except they come up with a more progressive decentralization program, which is not on the horizon. Actually, they do the opposite. The military try to centralize power back to the bureaucracy, to the interior ministry. Now they cancel all the local elections. So instead of more decentralization in order to solve regionalism, they try to bring back the centralization. The Deep South is another separate problem. It's not related to this polarization between the red and the yellow. They're not involved in this political conflict at the national capital. They want to have more regional autonomy for their own region, 3 provinces, right? And the military lately try to resume a talk, the peace talk that initiated by Yingluck government. And Prayut visit Malaysia and asked Malaysia to play a role of facilitator of this talk. But so far, the insurgent group didn't respond to government initiative. So it's still unclear what the situation are going to unfold for the southern insurgency.
On that note, let us thank Dr. Santithan and Dr. Pajak with some applause.